you know, at our age, we're not geniuses right away. So don't assume that that your opinions are going to be right all the time. You're here to, in college, you're here to learn, and we're always learning from each other. And eventually we'll be teachers for one another as well as learners. But it's important to learn how to listen first, and learn how to, speak with an open mind and not be overzealous about your position.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Dialogue, Dissent, and Debate. We have got some incredible students here today to share with you all about the work they're doing on their campuses, how they're going about it, and just how can we create a better political culture on our college campuses. We've got 5 different groups involved, 3-star speakers from 3 groups. From Open Dyalog, Princeton Open Campus Coalition, and the Minnesota Bipartisan Issues Group, and BridgeUSA and Heterodox Academy are hosting this. So what brings all of us together, right, is, we do different things, we've got different end goals, different methods, but what we all have in common is that we'd like a more open campus, right? A campus that has places for dialogue, right, and has places for constructive disagreement, and it has places where the university doesn't have to be an orthodoxy, right, but can be a heterodoxy. And so we all have these common goals in mind. We go about it in a little bit of different ways, but I'm very excited to share with you all tonight these wonderful 3 students and the work that they're doing on their campuses. Before we jump into things, I really want to extend a huge thank you to a couple different people. First, from my organization, from BridgeUSA, Jess Carpenter, helping us to put together the marketing and the graphics for this. Been a huge help. I'd also like to extend a huge thank you to Heterodox Academy for partnering with us on this, and specifically to Daniel Coas, who has done a bunch of work behind the scenes, is making this all happen right now. So thank you to Heterodox and to Daniel Coas especially. And finally, I want to give a huge thank you to each of our 3 panelists tonight. They've been working with us on this event for the last month or more now, and stayed really engaged and gave us all the help that we needed. So a huge thank you to you 3. And as I will read their bios now, and as I do that, you 3 panelists, you're welcome back on screen. So our first panelist is Alex Thomson. Alex is a junior at the University of Minnesota. He is majoring in biochemistry with a minor in psychology. He enjoys researching chemicals and spending time outdoors. He serves as a group officer for Minnesota Bipartisan Issues Group, also known as BIG. So Alex, thank you for being with us. Our second panelist is Vanessa Nguyen, who is a full-time undergraduate student at UC San Diego. She's from the Bay Area. Vanessa fell in love with Open Dyalog after meeting a group of intelligent, diverse, and compassionate students. She has grown to appreciate and understand different perspectives and backgrounds. Vanessa is studying human development and education studies currently serves as the president of Open Dyalog. Our final panelist, Rebekah Adams, is an undergraduate senior in the Chemical and Biological Engineering Department at Princeton University. She's the outgoing president of the Princeton Open Campus Coalition and a board member of Princetonians for Free Speech. Thank you all for being here. I will give a warning to our audience. I got my second dose today, and my throat's a little bit wacky, so bear with me as I get through that. The first thing I'd like to do is ask you all just about what you do. If you could introduce yourselves, kind of explain what your group's purpose is, why you were founded, right? And I would love to hear a little bit about the methods you use on campus and kind of your theory of change about how you get to your stated goals. So Rebekah, I'd love to start with you. Give us a little intro.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you touched a bit about me personally. I recently graduated, so that's also good. But yeah, I transferred my officership as president of POCC to another person, and that's also great. So I guess I'll focus more on the origins of my group. So we formed really in 2015, and that was really in response to the sit-ins led by the now defunct Black Justice League when they proposed a series of action items that would, stifle academic discourse and free speech, etc. And so the first iteration was really in response to that. A very diverse group members. I think I have an opportunity to engage with a while back. And then in 2020, which everyone's more familiar with, so POCC reunited in response to the student-led petition and demands for anti-racist administration and policy changes that also had a similar nature of stifling that civil discourse and academic freedom. For instance, like requiring, imposing certain course requirements as opposed to letting students choose for themselves, And so in response, the earlier members really crafted an open letter to President Eisgruber in response to that. And that's where the whole story pretty much began. And then after that, I took the reins from there after I got comfortable with it. So yeah, I guess the main purpose really is to kind of fight against this sort of, you could view it as fighting against a sort of orthodoxy on campus, but also to highlight the fact that there are different opinions on campus. And, you don't have to follow the mainstream, you don't have to follow mob rule. There are going to be people with different opinions, and you have to, stand by the Chicago principles, for instance, and you have to stand by, your views and be confident in that. And that's the point of a liberal arts education. It's not to, dogmatize knowledge, but also to expand your knowledge by engaging with other people. So that's really the main point. And I guess you asked about methods too, correct? So yeah, so briefly, just like open letters as you get a sense. We also do op-eds, individually or like in the group. But we're hoping to evolve more towards like events that encourage discussion, and having a podcast as well. We have a good channel with a podcast. So we're transitioning more towards that, and yeah, I'm looking forward to more of that in the future.
Cool, thank you so much. Alex, would you like to go?
Yeah, of course. So I'm from Minnesota Big at the University of Minnesota. I'm a group officer there. And the point of our student group is very much about getting individuals to talk. So sort of the, theology of Big is that, it's our belief that political polarization is increasing in the country, and that people are getting more and more entrenched in echo chambers, and that's not a good thing. So the point of Big and what we do is we have weekly meetings where we have a topic of the week. So we've done gun control, healthcare, immigration, whatever. Every meeting we democratically vote on whatever the next meeting topic is going to be. We break up into groups and we just try to get people to talk about things in a respectful, open way that's constructive. So we have people from all across the political spectrum, centrists, all the way out to pretty wackadoodle folk. But we work hard to encourage that open dialogue and that constructive, respectful conversation around different issues.
You say wackadoodle is an official term, or?
It's an official term, and I'm considered one of them, for the record. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. As a wackadoodle, you can speak to that. I like that a lot, Alex. So Vanessa, you want to round us out and tell us a little bit about Open Dyalog?
Sure. So I'm currently the president of Open Dyalog. And in 2019, we started as a residential community event at UC San Diego. One of our founders started this as a response to hate crimes in her residential community. And so it was just called Village Discussions or Restorative Justice Circles. And the following year, it became a student organization on campus at UC San Diego. And as we were doing our thing on campus, the pandemic hit. And so that's when we shifted online, as we all did. And we took it as an opportunity to expand across the world. So already one of our team members from UC San Diego was an international student from the Netherlands. And so We've had people on our Zoom call and people on our team from the Netherlands. We've had people from New Zealand, the East Coast, and we still have people on the East Coast. And so it's really amazing to see how we've grown just from a UC San Diego community to now what is a nonprofit organization. So we're really branching out, and we mostly stick to dialogues. There's different types of dialogues though. So we have open discussions, group discussions, and sometimes we have a mixture of having a panel of people come speak. And we're always, growing and open to changing and learning because we're such a new organization. But essentially, our goal is to get people to build community with one another, but also to promote active listening. We love talking about controversial topics and trying to reach a middle ground. If you can't agree with somebody else, we understand, we respect that, but we're here to listen to one another and learn from one another, really. And we also really love to enforce, building community, leaning into discomfort, maybe asking questions and talking about things that you don't normally talk about. That's open dialogue.
Well, thank you all. I love how you're all kind of engaged in different things. Alex is doing a lot of cross-partisan dialogue. Vanessa is working on those dialogues about, and making people a little bit uncomfortable, leaning into that and creating that community. And Rebekah working on publishing those op-eds and those open letters. And I'd love to actually kind of dive into that a bit more. Vanessa, I'd like to go back to you. What do you think the magic is in the kinds of dialogues that you have at Open Dyalog? Why do you think that that's the right way to go about things?
Yeah, so one thing about open dialogue I'll briefly go over is that we have 3 different types. So we have personal dialogues, which are, maybe a conversation. We can talk about loneliness or friendship or social media, and it's not really meant to be necessarily controversial, though they can be. It's kind of a way to build community and get to know how people feel about certain different things. There's always a spectrum of opinions. Then we have identity dialogues, which are usually panel based. And so we have people from a certain identity come represent, their identities, their backgrounds, come share a little bit. And we encourage people to, hey, maybe you've always had those questions, but you never figured out how to ask it without being rude, or you didn't want to come off a certain way, but you're really curious. And it's a time to learn about people and different identities. And then the last one is controversial dialogues or open dialogues. And those are like a standard. Gun rights is something that, there's always going to be a spectrum of opinions, but we always know that coming into that, there will be people with different ideas and ideologies. And it's really interesting every time to see people also of different ages. Although we target young adults and college students, sometimes we get people who are a little bit older and they bring in different opinions and experiences that we've never had before. And so I think the impact really comes from this open space that we create for people. It's not necessarily a safe space, it's more of a brave space where we encourage everyone to just say, hey, you all have your own opinion. As long as we respect one another, as long as we come into this discussion with the willingness to listen to one another, then we can conquer anything. Like, we can have disagreements, respectfully disagree with one another. And so I think that impact really comes from the ability to have such an open space in ways that is not usually facilitated in like your friendships or your classrooms or in the workplace. You usually beat around the bush with a lot of things. But at Open Dyalog, our discussions are really a free-for-all in a sense, but we do have some community guidelines to keep everything in check.
It's an excellent point that sometimes you can't even have these conversations with people you're very close to. So having that space is very useful. So I'd like to ask you, Alex, your group is a lot more focused kind of specifically on the politics, right? And cross-partisan dialogue. And I wonder kind of why that's your thrust and what you think about the effectiveness of that.
We're focused on politics because it's simple and it's easy. There's certainly plenty of work to be done in plenty of other areas, and Vanessa, big might have to steal. This isn't a safe space. This is a brave space. That's a good tagline. But the point of focusing specifically on politics is that there's usually something going on politically that gets people sort of interested, riled up on a particular issue. And it's one sort of, discrete chunk of, the growing cultural tensions across our universities and our broader country that is easy to sort of separate out and think about in isolation, whereas a lot of other things are more entrenched or tied into other parts of, personality or lifestyle or whatnot.
Yeah, there are a lot of things to talk about in this world. Any chance to focus in is certainly valuable. And Rebekah, you said you're mainly focused on op-eds and maybe open letters and even a podcast. You also mentioned about moving to more events. So I'd love to hear about kind of why those were the methods you have used in the past and what you think their kind of effectiveness is. But then also maybe why you want to transition some.
Yeah, I mean, the point of an open letter, as one would see generally, is to make a direct point about something that you normally can't do in a conversation, especially if you want to present a certain opinion that, or some general idea that, has to be like reinstated against something that no one has really, talked about. It's like, well, no one has talked about this issue and you're just about to change some policy. Well, here's another way of looking at it. So, there's more of an affirmative direct way of, doing that using an op-ed or open letter. And the reason for transitioning to, let's say casual discussions, having a podcast is to, well, not so much to be reactionary to what's happening, but also to lead by example, like to create, to demonstrate how to have a conversation and how to have a conversation with someone with opposing opinions, and just post it and be confident about posting that, because I think someone mentioned it here earlier, like one of the things that's lacking is the ability for us to actually have a conversation. I don't think we don't have good examples of that anymore, and so it's just another way of presenting that, even if it is very informal.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I like your point. Yeah. Having a discussion event doesn't actually get your point across to anyone. It maybe muddles it. So if you want to be pointed, that's what you got to do. So I'd love to ask you all, and I know it's been a tough year. Boy, do I know it's been a tough year. It's been a tough year for everyone. But as far as campus organizing goes, it's really tough. As far as dialogue goes, it's very tough because these things are, in my opinion, always better in person. But I'd like to start with you, Alex, and kind of ask, both within this year, but maybe before it, kind of what impact do you feel like you're having, and do you feel like you're driving change on campus, and how are you seeing that?
Well, because our group is very much about getting individuals to talk with other individuals, it's a subtle change, and for better or worse, our group is still pretty small in the scope of the U of M. I mean, the Twin Cities campus is a quite large college, and we, especially over the past few months, we've had 10 to 20 recurrent members. So we haven't had a huge impact campus wide, but our real focus is on getting individuals to think more about their own political positions and the political positions of other people, and also just helping them to sort of reframe their mindset from those people are wrong or bad or icky, and instead thinking that they care about the same things that I do, and they have the same emotions that I do, and they just have different conclusions, and developing that respect for your common man is something that we push really hard for, and that I've seen a lot of people come into big and get more of that as time goes on, and that's what we try to do, and that's what's important to us.
Have you felt any of that yourself, Alex?
Oh yeah, big time. Coming into big, I was a much more aggressive debater type, shall we say. But big has definitely loosened me up and made me more capable of having conversations, and especially in a non-aggressive way, which is the way you want to have them, especially if you're with, because some people like the, you know, the sword fighting and the, ooh, you're wrong, facts and logic, whatever. But there's a lot of people in the world, the majority really, who would rather have like a really polite conversation, maybe some, you know, Socratic method. And Big has taught me how to use those effectively with people who wouldn't be so receptive to the clash that a lot of real political ideologues appreciate.
Yeah, and I think you kind of made a great point about maybe you aren't as known by many people, but if you're really changing the hearts and minds of some, but in a significant way, that's also a very valuable impact to have. So, Vanessa, I'd love to ask you a similar question. I know a lot of your existence has been online, but what do you feel about the impact that you're having on your attendees, and maybe, you know, San Diego, but even just maybe people from around the world, you know, like.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, part of being online gives us the opportunity to connect with people and different cultures and identities and backgrounds that we, you know, never really thought of. Like we were in a Zoom call and somebody from Nigeria joined, and we were like, wow, you know, like that's kind of crazy that we had this reach and we were able to talk to them about like, how's everything over there in Nigeria? Like what experiences do you have in relation to the topic today? But also like learning and hearing from somebody from Nigeria who I don't know if many of us can connect with people around the world that way. How are your experiences? How have you been? And so in terms of like other forms of impact, it's just like, you know, measuring the statistics and numbers, like, you know, the number of participants you have, the hours of discussion, the feedback and interest of other orgs is also something that we take into account. Like you mentioned, you know, quality over quantity in a sense, being able to change the perspective of one person is already being able to change the perspective of the world. You know, like there's 7 billion people out there, but if you've changed one person's life, you've changed everything. And so understanding the ways that we affect people is really important. And so some of the ways that we see that is through like direct feedback from team members, from general members of like, hey, I never thought about that before. Maybe that's something that you had never discussed before, but you're excited. You come into into the discussion, you say, well, I've never really had much experience about talking with marriage and divorce, but I'm here to learn. You know, like a lot of people come into the discussion coming what they want to get out of today. And I hope most, if not everyone, leaves fulfilled, maybe learning things that they didn't expect to learn. And something I mentioned earlier is the interest of other organizations. And so something that we noticed, even though we're so new, we started just maybe 2 years ago, other organizations and student governments and student councils at UC San Diego and UCLA have reached out to us in interest of, hey, we want to facilitate a discussion on Black Lives Matter or police brutality. And they're reaching out to us because they know that we have experience doing those things and they feel a little uncomfortable doing those things. And so they're reaching out to us for support. And so I think that is also a form of impact, understanding that we can guide other people to have these discussions. It's not just always us going to be doing these, but we can pave the way for like future leaders, our peers and colleagues to say, this is how you can have a respectful conversation. We can even come in and help facilitate that discussion for you, but we can also give you the skill sets that you need to teach other people to facilitate those dialogues. And, you know, even just attending a dialogue, you can learn a lot about the soft skills of like, oh, this is how I can respond to somebody if I don't agree with them. Or, you know, watching other discussions, you can already gain a lot. So I think impact can be measured both with the data, but I think, you know, beyond the data, a lot of stories of impact come from directly working with the community that you're in and seeing the ways that people outside of your community come to you and they gravitate towards you and they're interested in your own mission and your purpose.
That's so cool when you can become a platform for other people. And you know what I'd say to our audience is anyone can do this work, but you need some experience. I'm sure all three of these people have learned a lot. And I think this is a perfect time to mention that if you want to do a little question and answer with all three of these panelists, you want to learn more, you want to talk to them one-on-one, there'll be a Zoom link at the end of this that you can join and you can actually have some conversation with them, have some dialogue with with the students making it happen on their campuses. So look out for that as we close. Rebekah, talk to me about the impact you feel like you've had at Princeton and how that's gone.
Yeah, I mean, I could start within like the whole group dynamics. I think one of the important things is that we did establish a sense of camaraderie among each other. I think that's important because, you know, it's important to at least have people supporting each other in the cause in the first place, because it's nowadays defending free speech is a hard cause. And there's a lot of misconceptions. So that, I guess that's a good, even though it's a little thing, it's a good thing. And I think beyond that, what I've noticed that throughout the semester is that, you know, we see other organizations pop up, like outside the university. We have Alliance for, it's like Academic Alliance for Free Speech. I believe it's AFA. And we also have Princetonians for Free Speech, and that's created by the alumni. It's created by 2 alumni from class of 70, I believe. And the fact that, you know, there are faculty and alumni that are actually responding to this issue and are taking it seriously, I think that's also very important. And I think one more thing, like when we established a YouTube channel and we had one event with, I think it was like Glenn Lowry and Rendell Kennedy, you know, some people retweeted it. Like I think Ben Shapiro and Glenn Lowry retweeted it. I was like, what? Wow, that's actually amazing. So we're actually doing something important. And like all I just hope, you know, as I transfer a lot of these things, that this keeps getting bigger. Because like towards the end of the year, I noticed, you know, other student organizations wanted to start collabing with us, and I was like, I gotta transfer this over. Like you'll take the reins, and I'll be confident in that. But I think that's great. Like even though you know, we received a lot of like negative feedback when we started off, and like you know, that happens, you know. I think at the end of the day, if there are those out there who are supporting your cause within and outside the university and are, you know, helping you to also curate your mission, I think that's also very special, another way to measure your impact, both in the short term and the long term.
Yeah, it's you know, to all the people watching tonight, you know, the experience that Rebekah had, right, where Ben Shapiro, Glenn Lowry are retweeting something that they did. Sometimes it can feel like, hey, we're just students sitting here, you know, just we got a wild idea to make the campus more open, right, or to have a constructive discussion about this. This is so needed in our society that you're going to see a lot of other people pick up on it. So if it feels small, it's not small, it's huge. So if you can get involved in one of these organizations or one of your own, you'll have a big impact on a lot of people. So some of you, both Rebekah and Vanessa, mentioned working with other student groups, right, and other groups popping up. And I think that's always a big question when you come into college organizing. How do I make these relationships? How does this happen, right? And I'm wondering, Rebekah, if you could speak about what that process is like for you, and some of the people you may have partnered with, and how would you go about that for anyone watching in the audience who wanted to do a similar thing?
Yeah. So I mean, the way to approach it is to just have an idea and then go for it and pitch it. And I think the advantage here at Princeton is that, you know, everyone knows someone, and everyone knows someone who's a leader of an organization. The fortunate thing is that members of our group are, let's say, like participants, let's say the James Madison program. And so I wanted to work something on that. It didn't lift off this semester, but we have a plan. So that's all that matters. Yeah, that's just a way of approaching it. Or sometimes the vice president reaches out to people, or sometimes like I get one of my members to reach out to people, because, you know, it's really, again, like it kind of goes back to how we decide, like, you know, how to, you know, what to do for the rest of the semester. You know, it's whatever everyone's interested in, and if a group member is really passionate about it, they have the opportunity to reach out to whoever. But yeah, that's really the general process, just having an idea and then fleshing it out and pitching it to someone, or someone reaches out to us, and then we'll make it happen.
Thank you. Vanessa, what have your partnerships been like? What have they been for? And any advice for people trying to create those, about what makes a good relationship there?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. And for us, we do reach out to some orgs, but also some orgs reach out to us. We often collaborate with the Civil Discourse Club at UC San Diego because naturally our missions and what we enjoyed doing as an organization really aligned with one another. So we often had different discussions about, propositions, and they were mostly political based because that's what the Civil Discourse Club is interested in. And we also had discussions with the Associated Students, which is the student government on campus. Again, it was around the election season, so we did have discussions on propositions based on the political climate of what's going on around us and based on the interests of the student body and your target audience. So, for Civil Discourse Club, we'd love to do one about, political topics. With Associated Students, they're trying to gauge, what do students in this community need right now? They might need some more education, or they might need a space to talk about what's happening with the political climate of elections and propositions and voting. And we've also collaborated with ReLife, which is another organization foundationally based at UC San Diego. And we talked more about identity-based topics because they had ReLife is basically, if you can think of Humans of New York, it's pretty similar, where they interview people and capture their stories and their identities. And so we thought it would be great to do an identity dialogue or identity panel with them. So we brought in people from both ReLife and Open Dyalog to talk about LGBTQ acceptance. And so for us, organizations, whether we reach out to them or they reach out to us, we're really flexible about what are the needs and wants that you have and how do they align with us. And we can do identity, we can do personal, we can do controversial. It's really all about, gauging what they need and what we want, and also like what is going on in the world around us. So a lot of our controversial discussions, identity discussions, or personal discussions, they're all revolving around things that are, maybe trending on social media, or things that are relevant to the community right now. So trying to understand what are things that people want to talk about.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Vanessa. Alex, any thoughts on partnering or developing relationships with other people or groups on campus?
We don't do a ton. We do an annual debate between the college Republicans and the college Democrats, and that's been fun and interesting. Trying to put that on. We'll, develop a list of a certain number of questions and get them to give their takes and spar a little up on stage. Other than that, not as much. We don't, perhaps a more individual organization than the other two.
I mean, getting college Republicans and college Democrats to sit down for a debate is it's a Herculean feat in and of itself. So I think,
getting either of them really, but
yeah.
At this point, we've had a long-standing enough tradition that, they're good for it usually.
Yeah, you got to show them that you don't mean any harm. You actually just want to hear them talk. It's an incredible idea. So I'd love to turn to some more kind of targeted questions for each of you, because all of you do slightly different things. And Alex, I'm gonna go right back to you. You're so focused on politics, and I wonder if you have a difficult time kind of, you said they're wackadoos, but do you have a difficult time convincing hardcore partisans to join your club? And do you think that there are kind of unique struggles for an explicitly bipartisan group?
Interestingly, no. Actually, we have quite a few people who are fairly partisan. It seems to me, from an admittedly limited sample size and a not well-controlled analysis, that there isn't that much correlation between political extremity and willingness to talk with other people, which is good. It's hopeful. So, you know, might be an overly optimistic take on the you know, small amount of evidence I've collected, but the real defining factor isn't how extreme you are. It's, you know, how willing you are to listen to people, be respectful, and have that, you know, open conversation. As far as bipartisan issues go, we have been, you know, accused on a few occasions of ignoring other areas of politics because, hey, bipartisan, by means too. Sure, but show up to one of our events and see if you can place everybody firmly on either the left or the right. You're not gonna, you're gonna get, you know, maybe 1/3, maybe, if you're lucky. So that's sort of a rhetorical issue that we have with the club. An issue that we've worried about year after year, although it hasn't really come to fruition, is the club getting too far swung in one direction or the other, because it's hard to have an open discussion if, you know, 9 out of 10 people are firmly on one side of the issue. That's part of why during our discussions every week, we work really hard to try to break whatever big group we have into multiple subgroups. They're all balanced individually. But yeah, so representation across the diversity of opinions and willingness to discuss.
Yeah, the point about there being a maybe even a different political axis, right? That's not like super left, super right, but it's more like, do you care at all versus do you care so much that you can't have a constructive discussion about it, and operating more on that axis. I love that. Vanessa, so you focus on dialogue and some often around issues of identity, as you mentioned previously. How do you approach these kind of topics? They're very touchy. How do you make sure that you have that good constructive dialogue about something that's so near and dear to people's hearts?
Yeah, definitely. And so one thing that I had mentioned earlier is community guidelines. And so if you ever attend an open dialogue discussion, we'll start off with these guidelines, and just some of them, to name a few, are to actively understand, and to ask questions. So miscommunications happen all the time and misunderstandings happen all the time. So we encourage everyone to like really listen and take in what the other person's saying. I really love this saying that I got from Zahavia, and maybe she got it from somebody else who are Zahavia, our founder. She would say, like, how often when you're, you know, discussing or arguing with somebody, how often are you actually listening to what they're saying as opposed to trying to formulate your response? And I'm still guilty of this. Like, I'll be in an argument with somebody and I'm like, I know exactly what I'm going to say to their last point and to the point before that. And I'm already thinking about it, right? But how often do we actually remove ourselves and say, I'm going to go ahead and listen to what this person has to say and try to understand what they're saying? And I mean, that goes with asking questions, right? If you're listening and you don't feel you understand something, which is totally okay, it's okay to ask questions. So we encourage that. We also encourage learning in whatever form that takes for you. And so like one of our guidelines is to be okay with being quote unquote wrong. And so there is no wrong or right, but if you come into our discussion and you leave with a different opinion, that's totally awesome. Like that's something that we encourage because you're learning and changing your opinion, and people will change over time. I think that's something that I really dislike about social media and cancel culture in particular, because once somebody says something and they put it out there, a lot of people don't believe that you can change and they don't believe that you can learn. But we're human. We're bound to learn, we're bound to change, and we're bound to at some point feel like we did something wrong, or that, oh, maybe what I thought 5 years ago isn't what I think now, right? And you know, maybe in a shorter time span or on a micro level, you come to a discussion, you hear a different person's experience, a different person's identity, you're like, oh, that's something that I've never heard of before. I think maybe my first opinion about this was maybe a little wrong, or maybe I understand why people have the opinions that they do. And so again, with that, don't try to win. There's no winning or losing, especially in such touchy conversations, and definitely not challenging the person. And so we have trained facilitators who go through workshops and facilitator trainings to feel comfortable in this space of how can I de-escalate any situations that go awry, or how can I lead by example? How can I, as a facilitator, be an objective person? How can I step away from the spectrum and just say, hey, I'm here to lead a respectful discussion around these issues today. And, there is no bias or lack of bias in our trained facilitators, because we want to promote this space where people don't feel intimidated to share their opinions, but also they won't feel like, oh yes, the facilitator's on my side, or oh no, the facilitator doesn't agree with me. And so like those two things are really important. So having those community guidelines that set the tone every discussion, and also having facilitators who can do their best to objectively lead a conversation where everyone feels welcome, everyone feels like their voice can be heard and will be heard.
There's so many great points in there. I'll just pick on one, that the thing you said about active listening and trying to listen to someone, not to respond, but only to understand. I want to challenge all of the audience members to just try that when you're listening to someone you don't like, even if it's just some clip on Twitter. Just sit there and try to absorb all of it and watch how difficult it is. It's a skill you have to build, you have to practice. So you got to go try it. Rebekah, I'd love to turn to you finally. I know there's been, you probably put yourself a little bit in the hot seat, kind of coming out against what we might call an orthodoxy. And so what was the campus reaction to the creation or the recreation of your group? And, what was your personal experience like? What was the personal experience like of people within Princeton Open Campus Coalition? How'd you handle that backlash?
Yeah, so I guess most of the reactions really came from the students. So, at least I will give credit to the fact that at least Princeton maintain its integrity and upholding free speech and making sure that is the case. That being said, I would say we experienced a lot of cyberbullying. I guess several of us have been doxxed, to put it very frankly. Just like pictures on Facebook, and I'm just like, why would you do that? And I know one of us lost potential internship, and thank God at least that has been sorted out for him, but that has been particularly rough. Yeah, and I guess also we've been accused of being like a monolith and like a right-wing organization, stuff like that. And the unfortunate thing is that, free speech and academic freedom is viewed as like a conservative cause, so that also doesn't help. Yeah, I mean, I guess there are many things I can mention, but I think I'll just go to the positive aspect, and it just really comes down to the fact that, first of all, that we're glad that we found each other, and second of all, at least we were able to support each other, and that's one thing, and also at least there were alumni that were able to stand behind us, and faculty that are able to stand behind us. So even though let's say personally I've lost some friends along the way of this journey, at least I gained new companions and in issues that I care about, but also just lifelong companions either way. And we learn a lot from each other, and we learn about ourselves and how to approach I guess this issue moving forward, I guess. So I guess, apart from just having support, it just really comes down to the fact that you just have to be, you have to be mentally strong, but you also, see who could stand up and represent, and who could also sit back at times, because I know not many people would have confidence expressing their opinions and then having it out there. And then if they're filing for a job and then that resurfaces, and if it looks bad on them, many people understand why would you not speak up too much. So yeah, it's just like learning about that in the process of things, like learning how to navigate that area, especially when you have a network of people who are, of course, like tenured and like are more supported, who know exactly how to navigate that. At least that's to our advantage. And so I would say at the end of the day, we're grateful for that. I would say it's interesting though, as as a person of color, like they don't expect you to defend this cause, and it's really interesting the comments I've gotten from that, and I won't make it too explicit, but it's really interesting what people say about that. But hey, at the end of the day, you defend what you believe in, and at least you have people standing behind you. So
yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm really sorry that happened to you and to members of your group, and I appreciate that you ended on somewhat of a more positive side, that at least you found each other and had some support through the creation and through fighting for what you believe for. Couldn't have said it better. So we're nearing some audience Q&A. I've got one final question for you all to ask you, and it's a big question, but Rebekah, I'm gonna turn it right back to you. Say, what advice would you give to other members of Gen Z watching this that aren't yet involved in this work, and what should they be doing, right? How should they get involved?
yeah, I mean, if you have like an organization like one of our organizations on campus or similar to that, definitely check it out and join it. And if you feel confident enough, then definitely take a position in that. If you don't have it on campus, try to find support. Any means you can. You don't have to make it an instantaneous thing, but like let's say you have a group of friends and you want to start it like a nice small group, you can start from there. And so that's more of like a technical aspect. In terms of general things, it's important to know that at our age we're not geniuses right away, so don't assume that that your opinions are going to be right all the time. You're here in college, you're here to learn, and we're always learning from each other. And eventually we'll be teachers for one another as well as learners. But it's important to learn how to listen first, and learn how to speak with an open mind and not be overzealous about your position. And yeah, just recognize that we're just people with opinions, no one's your enemy. We're all friends here. And lastly, it's always okay to, go against the mainstream. That's what makes the true change. It's not if you follow the wave, it's if you just go against, sometimes you just have to go against the grain, and that's what makes the difference.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Alex, what advice are you giving to Gen Z? How do they go about this life they've been given?
Oh, well, if I may be so bold, what Rebekah said is very apt. It's important to recognize that we're not smart, but in a political discussion, it's advantageous to assume that the person you're talking to is operating completely in good faith. And there's a difference between good faith and being educated or being right? We all have opinions that we've developed based on life experiences or faulty heuristics. And of course, every time the topic comes up, everybody goes, oh yeah, those god dang other people, they got it all wrong, but me. No, you, we all have, weird idiosyncrasies and things we're very, very poorly educated on. And coming to a certain state of humility with that and accepting it, I think, is a good way to move forward and become actually properly educated and involved.
Yeah, I think that's great. There's a lot of pressure on people these days to have an opinion and be right about everything. But, I heard a statement before a group spoke one time that I'm not right about everything. I'm probably wrong about a lot of things, and I might be wrong about everything. And that level of humility that you're talking about, I think it's so important. Vanessa, would you round us out, finish us off with these moderated questions? What advice do you have for Gen Z?
Yeah, I totally agree with what both Rebekah and Alex have said so far. Really great insight. Anything new to that, I would just say be okay with discomfort. You're never going to grow if you're always in your comfort zone, right? So if you're not already doing this work, or if you have no idea what this work is about, it doesn't have to necessarily be this work, but just in life in general, lean into discomfort, because that's how you're really going to grow. And you can start having these discussions, debates at a micro level with your family, your friends, your significant others. And if they are uncomfortable, it's the whole point, right? So, and finally, I would just say gather a sense of purpose. It doesn't have to be related to dialogue or debate or what we're talking about today, but I will say that humans are natural storytellers. And so there's so much power in having us be able to share opinions and share our stories with one another. And in the same vein, there's a lot of power in listening to others. So definitely take that as you will. So this doesn't have to be, your purpose in life. You don't have to be seeking out dialogue and debate in every aspect of life, but know that it is a really important facet in society. And if you can take advantage of that, and if you can get a grip on it and say, this is how I can use this tool to make my life better, to change the world, by all means, go ahead and do that.
Wow. Well, that's just, you all are great. If you all are the future leaders of this country, I got so much hope. Go on Twitter, you wouldn't think it, but I think if you all are in charge, we'll get far. So now we're going to turn to some audience Q&A. If you haven't had the chance to ask a question yet, you got a question brewing, throw it in the Q&A. We'd love to answer it. The first question comes from Talia. I hope I'm saying that right. So mentioning Heterodox Academy has published research showing that many students feel they need to censor their political views on campus. Have you all seen that? And if so, kind of what do you think about it? And I'm going to leave it up to you to see who wants to jump in first.
I certainly have seen it. Of course, it's difficult to know when people are lying, right? People could be, disguising all kinds of areas of their own political compass. But one particular instance comes to mind. This was my freshman year, pre my work with Big, so I didn't have it as a thing to reference. I was talking to this girl, and the subject of politics came up, and she said, and I roughly quote, "I'd love to talk with you more about this, but there are things I don't feel comfortable saying on campus." And I was like, what on, I didn't know what she meant. Unfortunately, didn't get her number. I never know. It keeps me up at night. The mystery of what naughty thing, what horrible political thing she possibly could have been hiding. But she was unwilling to speak of it on campus, even with someone who was, presumably welcoming to it, just in the fear that she might have been overheard.
Vanessa, Rebekah, have you seen it happen? What do you think about it?
I guess I could answer to that. I haven't seen the Heterodox Academy statistic. I remember seeing, however, I think it was from the Cato Institute, about how Americans self-censor themselves. I think it's 62%. Yeah, I honestly, I personally don't doubt the fact that is the case. Especially, like you see it in certain classrooms, for instance, here, especially if it's, let's say, a heated topic like abortion. No one, I'm pretty sure no one who holds more of a pro-life position would want to speak up on that. It's not to say, however, with other topics, there are going to be, people on the other side of the spectrum that aren't afraid of speaking up about that. I think that's the case for both sides, honestly. And I think that's an issue. I'm just speaking from more of a conservative lens, because that seems to be more of the views that I've seen censored in more, let's say, more liberal institutions. I'm certain it may be a different case for institutions on the other side of the political spectrum. Either way, it's still an issue. And it could either be at the fault of the professors or at the fault of the fact. I think it's more the fault, however, of like social ostracization and, you know, like there's this whole complex that we have that we just have to keep our like social groups and our band of friends. We don't want to like, you know, ruin that if we say something wrong. So I think definitely most of it comes from that.
You know, just quickly, if you haven't seen the campus expression survey put out by Heterodox, it's incredible. You should go check it out. It's on the website. I'll give you the short top line, which is freedom of expression on campus is really, really bad right now, and it's not getting much better. So go check that out if you haven't seen it, for Rebekah and for anyone in the audience. Vanessa, any things to add on kind of the willingness to express one's own political views on campus?
Yeah, I agree with Alex and Rebekah, what they've said so far. I think like I think Rebekah said earlier, like college is the time to learn and change and grow. And honestly, I would say for a lot, not everyone, but for probably a good amount of college students going into college is that time when you're exposed to a lot of different people and environments that you have never seen before. So for me, like I grew up in, you know, one place my entire life, and then you're in a bubble of like, these are the people I know, these are the people I surround myself with, and you go to college and it's gonna more likely be different. And so I think, you know, that goes into play of influencing your political views, what you believe in general. And so I think um, it's really tricky because the campus usually wants to protect itself, right? A lot of campuses don't bring in certain political aspects because they don't want to look, they don't want the university to look poorly. They don't want to spark any controversy. And it really depends where you go. And my university is more liberal, but I have seen a lot of like backlash on students, especially students who express more conservative views. And so I think it is still really important though to not necessarily censor political views if we can give students the tools to respectfully have a conversation. Because if you have those tools, they wouldn't be such a big deal. But because a lot of us, not a lot of us, but a lot of people don't have those tools, these political views, you know, cause a lot of anxiety and distrust and a lot of controversy and that really poor reactions. So I think that there's lots of ways to go about it, but we shouldn't be, I don't think personally we should be censoring political views because, you know, college is that time for people to learn and grow.
Perfect. Well, thank you all for that. Our next question comes from Jack, and bear with me as he's given us some good context here. So Jack's the student trustee for his whole community college district, and the college is going on to start to work on kind of anti-racism, equity, diversity, inclusion things. And he hasn't really had the chance to present the student perspective. And it feels like the university is moving forward with that without any student input and already going to teachers and doing investigations. And so you all as politically engaged students, how would you go about advocating to your school board to actually listen to what students are saying within these matters?
That is definitely a tough one. And I would say, thankfully for me, my school and my supervisors are quite understanding, depending on who you talk to. But UC San Diego, in particular, is very my work supervisors. You know, the faculty there, they really love DEI, and you know, part of it is saving face for the university. I'm pretty sure. But at my university, they're pretty understanding. And so I think if you could find a faculty member or a supervisor that you can trust, maybe you can go to like the ethnic studies department and find a professor who teaches a class or like someone that you've had before or somebody within the system who you can get a hold of and say like, hey, as a student, these are my concerns. And they could advocate for you. I think that could be one way to get your foot in the door. Because like for me personally, I'm really sorry to hear about that, Jack, but for me, like personally, the work that I do in the university, like yes, the higher up, like the chancellor and the top dogs, the top administration, they usually probably aren't very receptive. But if you start with, you know, your professors, your supervisors, and then they go to the department heads and they keep going up and up, I think that could be one way. And I'm pretty sure with time, persuasion, persistence, hopefully things can come around.
I agree with Vanessa there. I think that's a good avenue to go to. I remember one of the things we did when we were concerned about, let's say certain biases in the PACE program, like how they're doing like orientation for student leaders. We just simply emailed them and like we just like signed our names under and said, may we talk to you about this as well? So yeah, I mean, definitely reach out and do that. And also if you feel that a faculty member would, reach or vouch for your cause better, definitely also reach out to them, allow them to email them or send a letter to whoever you need to speak to. I also advise just in case to, also tag along multiple voices as well. The more voices, the better. But at least get your foot in the door, as Vanessa said.
Alex, any thoughts on that issue? It's fine if not, but would love to hear.
Yeah, it's a sticky situation going after the bureaucracy. I think what Rebekah and Vanessa have said is pretty smart. I don't think I have much to add on top of their words and wisdom.
That's totally fine. I mean, I would just like to echo the ideas of persistence, right? Just keep knocking on those doors until someone opens them, and adding more voices, right? Maybe that's faculty, maybe another administrator, or even just hundreds of students. That's when people really have to start to listen. We've got another question from Douglas. And this is a question I love is, are there any topics that are not on the table for your clubs because they're deemed too controversial? Alex, I think you might have an answer to this one.
We do. We have one. It is abortion. It's been banned for a few years now. I didn't start it, so don't blame me, but it was the opinion of the club at a certain point that it was more difficult to have productive discussions about abortion than about basically any other issue. So we barred it from big group discussions as an official topic. There's been some vague movements for barring other topics. Israel-Palestine, there's a couple people moving for that. It never got any traction. Recently, this past semester, we tried to repeatedly vote in the topic revolutionaries. Are they justified? How cool are they? And there were certain members of the officer board tried to get that banned just out of spite for the officers who supported it, just as sort of a joking thing. But oh yeah, abortion's basically the only one that we have a hard line on.
Rebekah, anything off the table?
No, I don't. I think even within our group me, for instance, we talked about very controversial issues. So it's whatever the group decides, really, and I think everyone's very chill with it. Yeah, I think it also just depends on the nature of the group as well. So what happens now, what happen later, but I highly doubt anyone would ban a topic.
Vanessa, any thoughts?
For Open Dialogue, no. We actually have had multiple discussions on abortion, so it's really interesting to see, like how things go. But the only thing that I might say is that we had an incident with, and I'll give like a trigger warning as well, but we had incidents where members would talk about suicidal ideation, and it made a lot of people feel uncomfortable. And it wasn't something that was part of our original topic, but the conversations kind of derailed to go that way. And so with that, we had to figure out, like, we went back and forth on like, well, should we say that we can never talk about suicidal ideation? Should we say that we should avoid these topics? What should we do? Because we want to be respectful of everybody in this space. And for some people, that was a really heavy topic to suddenly talk about. So I think we came to the conclusion that, Open Dialogue really does prioritize that open space, that brave space. And so it's not off limits, but there are ways that we can have response-based approaches in case something does happen. And there are ways that we can prevent uncomfortable situations. But overall, we don't ban any topics.
Cool. I know you didn't maybe necessarily ask for my opinion, but I've got a heuristic that I use to determine whether a conversation will be heated or not. The first issue is mortality. Does this deal with life and death? And everything deals with life and death in some ways, but if it's very directly related to a life and death issue, that's going to bring the heat up way more. The second is morality, right? Especially on a question like abortion or even Israel-Palestine, you know, we're dealing with questions that can't be just answered through a study or through research or through facts, but they're questions about what we believe, you know, and like, what are the moral basis of our, you know, what are our moral underpinnings? And the final part is, if someone in that discussion is directly affected by the issue, that will also bring the heat up a lot. So I know Douglas didn't necessarily ask for my opinion, but I think it's useful. So that concludes dialogue, dissent, and debate. I tried to butcher the name at the end. I want to extend a huge thank you to Heterodox Academy and Daniel Coas for the work that he did, and also to you three panelists. I said it once, I'll say it again. If you're the future of our country, we're going to be fine. We're going to be working together across lines of difference. We're going to be having open conversations, allowing a heterodoxy of ideas. It gives me a lot of hope to talk to you all today. I hope it does the same for those in the audience. I do want to turn the audience's attention to the Zoom chat. We've got a feedback form for you. We've also got everyone's socials here, some calls to action for each group. So if you want to get involved, that's the best way to do it, especially through that feedback form. I know everyone's got feedback forms. You don't want to fill out the feedback form, but please do it for us. It'll help all of us here improve what we do, and also get in touch with you. The other thing that I will drop in the chat right here in a second is the Zoom link. So if you want to talk directly to these amazing students here, if you want to learn about all that is going on in their lives and how you can get involved, we got a Zoom for you. And give me just a second here. Hopefully while I'm stalling, you can fill out the feedback form. So would love to talk to you all. We will stay in that Zoom for a little bit, and it is now in the chat. So you can join that now and we'll hop over there. But finally, thanks to everyone for attending and for listening to these amazing students. And thank you, Alex. Thank you, Vanessa. And thank you, Rebekah, for all the work that you did for this event, but more importantly, the work that you did or are doing on your campuses. It's of the utmost importance. Please keep it up. I will see you all in the next Zoom.